Corporation Act. The new register is linked to developments that were announced by the Financial Action Task Force through our National Treasury in terms of the action plan that South Africa needs to implement in order to mitigate the risk of continued increased monetary or grey listing. Today's webinar, we will be providing information on the concept of beneficial ownership, the BO register itself, and offer guidance on legislative requirements. I now hand you over to Advocate Lucinda Steenkamp, and she will do the presentation for us. Thank you. Lucinda, I hand over to you. Can you please share your presentation with us? Okay, I think there's a slight delay in our broadcasting, but
Hi, Shani. Hi, everybody. Just give me a second. I am doing the sharing thing. Just bear with us.
Okay. Okay, we seem to be having a small challenge there, but I can see it on the screen. Awesome. I can see your presentation.
Fantastic. Can everybody hear me?
Yes, we can.
Okay, perfect. I'm going to go through that. Good morning again, everybody. My apologies for the gremlins that we are experiencing this morning on our technological platform, but we are ready to go. So I'm Lucinda Steenkamp. I'm the Senior Legal Advisor for CIPC Corporate and also the Manager responsible for beneficial ownership transparency in terms of the CIPC. And I'm going to take you through a presentation today focusing a bit more on the beneficial ownership register requirements, frequently asked questions, and the next steps for the CIPC. Background information, as Shani mentioned, the General Laws Amendment Act 22 of 2022 was written into law in December 2022, and it amended the Companies Act to mandate the CIPC to establish a beneficial ownership register and to collect information regarding corporate vehicles' beneficial ownership status. Companies Act Regulations Amendment was promulgated on the 24th of May. There's the Government Gazette notice for you, which provides legal backing to the requirements of the General Laws Amendment Act and the subsequent Companies Act Amendment. As a result of the promulgation of the Companies Act regulations, entities incorporated before 24 May 2023 is required to file their beneficial ownership information with the CIPC within 30 business days from its anniversary date, its incorporation date, and to submit any changes as and when it does change or once annually.
I'm so sorry, Lucinda, but can you please see that your presentation is standing still? I think it has frozen. You can please go on to presentation view and see, maybe that will assist you in.
It was on presentation view. It didn't want to move. Is it moving now? Is it on background?
Yes.
Okay, fantastic. So I'm just going to reiterate the last paragraph. As a result of the Companies Act Regulations Amendment and the promulgation thereof on the 24th of May, entities incorporated before that date is required to file their beneficial ownership information with the CIPC within 30 business days from its anniversary date or incorporation date, in line with the AR submission date, as and when it changes or once annually. Entities incorporated after the 24th of May is required to file its beneficial ownership information with the CIPC within 10 business days from date of incorporation, and thereafter update as and when it changes, or once annually if there's no changes. Entities that already passed its incorporation date at 24 May 2023 are required to file their beneficial ownership information as soon as possible. So what is meant with this last paragraph is some entities have already had their incorporation date before the 24th of May, and thus they have to file their beneficial ownership information as soon as possible. The purpose of the requirements is to ensure that all companies, external companies, and closed corporations comply with the beneficial ownership declaration requirements for the current financial year. You will have noticed that there is a Notice 53 of 2023 published on the CIPC website, which relates to the enforcement of beneficial ownership filings and securities registers as from the 1st of October 2023. I will talk to that a little bit later on in the presentation. Now, the beneficial ownership register was released. The CIPC released the register on its e-services platform on the 1st of April 2023. And to date, we have received 11,490 beneficial ownership applications that have been successfully completed. The functionality provides for corporate vehicles, companies, and closed corporations to submit with the CIPC the details regarding its beneficial ownership status, which is 5% and above, in terms of mentioned corporate vehicles. Failure to submit the required information is tantamount to non-compliance of the Companies Act, which could result in court-ordered administrative fines and sanctions. The BO register specifically, certain enhancements that have come about since the release of the functionality on the 1st of April 2023 is the first of these are OTPs, to the filer only. Initially, one-time PINs were sent to the directors and the members of the CCs to confirm the submission of the beneficial ownership information. However, this proved to be cumbersome, and it was subsequently enhanced so that OTPs are only sent to the filer, which highlights the importance of the mandate that needs to be in place. The directors and members, however, do receive notification that the beneficial ownership information has indeed been filed. Interest types, the definition of the beneficial ownership in the legislation is quite wide, and lists a number of beneficial ownership types and forms of control in that definition. The beneficial ownership register provides now for a drop-down list for filers to select the specific beneficial ownership or control applicable to the specific declaring company. Different categories of companies. There are 3 specific company categories that is now provided for on the register. The first of these is non-affected companies with beneficial ownership information to declare. These companies are not classified as affected companies in terms of the legislation and have beneficial ownership information to declare. They will follow the standard BO register requirements process and filing of the necessary information. If the category of affected company is selected, these companies, whether they have beneficial ownership information to declare or not, will only upload the mandatory documentation in terms of affected companies that is required and will not provide any beneficial ownership information if this category is selected. The last one is non-affected companies without beneficial ownership information. Believe me, there are a few of these as well. Companies that are not classified as affected companies who have 0 beneficial owners, they will be required to upload the mandatory documentation if this category is selected. To describe the different categories and how one can go about selecting the correct category, there's 2 questions that needs to be answered by the declaring company. First, the company must ascertain whether it's an affected company or a non-affected company, looking at the definition in the legislation. Once that question is answered, the company must then ascertain whether it holds any beneficial owners as per the definition provided for in the Act. So you can go through that definition in terms of the Act and answer the above two questions to ascertain which category will be selected on the register. Certain criteria can be applied in order to select the correct category, like the 5% threshold, ownership status. For example, members of an MPC are not necessarily owners, for example, deriving any benefit from the company. The board of directors can exercise effective control over the entity. If the answer is yes, then the board is regarded as beneficial owners and thus must be declared. The responses to the above two questions will guide any company in filing its beneficial ownership correctly and fully with the CIPC. I'm going to go through a few frequently asked questions that we've seen the last couple of months and try to assist the public with that guidance on what is required. One of these is the content of the mandate. There's no set template for the mandate that must be submitted, but this is a mandatory compulsory document. In short, it can be a letter, a resolution, or a power of attorney that must be on the company letterhead of the declaring company. Whether it's a letter, a resolution, or a power of attorney, the letterhead must be there indicating the name and registration number of the declaring company, as well as contact information. The mandate must be provided to an individual, a natural person with full names and ID number of the person that has an active customer code on the CIPC e-services in order to do the filing on behalf of the declaring company. And this mandate must be signed by 50% plus one of the directors of a company and all CC members in case of a CC filing. The content of the securities register is legislated. You can find details on that in terms of regulation 32.3. In short, the name, full names and ID number or any unique identifier. If it's foreigners, we are looking at passport numbers, we are looking at social security numbers. It must be a unique identifier. South African citizens, however, ID number, the number and the class of securities that that specific person holds, the beneficial interest that there might be in terms of those issued securities, holding it, for example, on behalf of another, and the extent of that interest. The beneficial interest list includes the name and ID number of that person, business, residential, or postal address, and contact information, preferably email. Beneficial owner information is also indicated in the securities register. The full name, date of birth, and ID or passport number of the beneficial owner, residential and postal address, email address, and the extent of the ownership or the effective control must also be indicated in terms of your securities register. So this is a short indication in terms of the legislation what the content of any securities register must look like. Secondly, the beneficial interest register, regulation 32A, natural person, full name, ID, passport, country of issue, etc. If it's a heuristic person, the full name and registration number must be indicated. Business, residential, or postal address, email, very important, and the extent of beneficial interest, whether it's ownership, control, and the percentage if applicable. There is a disclosure form available on the beneficial ownership register as well. This is not a mandatory form. It's something that the CIPC created in order to assist entities to file information if there is complex ownership structures in terms of the beneficial ownership of a declaring company, where they can make use of this form to draw up an organogram of the complex ownership structures if applicable. The CIPC may at any time require or cause the verification of information and documentation, which is indicated in Regulation 5.2, which means that information provided in terms of the disclosure form or any other information provided to the CIPC can be verified and validated, and the CIPC can request any further information based on that which was submitted already if there is clarity seeking questions or validation discrepancies, etc. So next steps, MOUs with registries. The Commission has conducted an analysis with regards to external companies registered and identified key jurisdictions. We are in the process of engaging to conclude several MOUs, memorandums of understanding, with these foreign registries, and some are already in place in order to share and validate information. Information sharing with regulators and law enforcement agencies. The Commission has been working with other agencies like SARS, the Financial Intelligence Center, etc., in developing the system to collect beneficial ownership with the objective that this information will be triangulated. Also, plans in terms of affected companies. The Commission provides for a separate dispensation in relation to affected companies which are listed on a recognized exchange. The purpose of this is mainly to avoid the duplication of records in that such information is already collected and kept in the records on other competent authorities like Straight, Computershare, Stockbrokers Association, etc. The sharing of this information will be periodically on an interagency basis. So when you tick that box that says affected company, there is compulsory information that must be submitted, but any other beneficial ownership information will then be validated against these entities like Straight in order to confirm the information already reported through those organizations. So what's next for the beneficial ownership register? We are continuously looking at feedback from the public on the query resolution system, on how they are finding the register, any issues that they are picking up that we are trying to develop and enhance the system further. First off is the processing of the filed beneficial ownership information by the CIPC. So a process is being developed where the actual information being submitted by the declaring companies are being verified, whether it's truthful and complete, and any errors, whether they are errors or incomplete or it's invalid, will then be rejected or nullified through this process. Once that happens, there's a refiling mechanism that will be built into this process as well, which will provide these entities the opportunity to refile any rejected or nullified submissions and correct any errors or incomplete information that was filed. The nullified applications, for example, will be verified on if there is any discrepancies, and that those will be addressed as well. Amendments, which is very important, it's legislative requirements that entities must be able to submit their amended beneficial ownership information. So Regulation 32B provides for non-affected companies that need to file with the Commission a copy of the updated securities register within 10 business days after that update, as and when the information on the security holders, beneficial interest holders, and beneficial ownership information changes. Such changes must be filed with the CIPC. Regulation 121A applies to affected companies where they must file with the Commission a copy of the updated beneficial interest register within 10 business days after that update. So these are all planned activities for the BO register in order to make the filing of beneficial ownership information as seamless as possible. Just a reiteration of the previous, this is on the e-services where you can find the beneficial ownership register and start your transaction of filing beneficial ownership information. In closing, everybody, the CIPC remains committed to the development of the BO register, implementation of the legislation, enforcement of compliance, and collaboration with all stakeholders in terms of SA Inc. The removal of South Africa from the grey list by the FATF is a country priority and providing law enforcement agencies with accurate, up to date, and reliable information on beneficial owners is paramount in achieving that goal. Realizing the purpose of the General Laws Amendment Act, which is the fight against money laundering and financing of terror activities, remains the ultimate goal that the CIPC and South Africa as a country need to look at. Change management links. This is just to give you an indication of where you can find the guidelines on beneficial ownership and the legislative requirements. This guide is quite helpful. It provides you with indication on how to file your beneficial ownership information, why we request the information that we do, and what supporting documents you must file. There's also guidance notices are published continuously on beneficial ownership on the CIPC website, so you must keep an eye out for that. You will also find updated frequently asked questions, updating it as and when is required in terms of BO. So keep your eye on the CIPC website for all these updated guidance notes and frequently asked questions to assist you in complying with the Companies Act. Thank you, everybody. That's it from me.
Thank you, Lucinda. That was very informative. Okay, so now we will get to the questions and answers sessions. Our questions will be posted on the screen, and thereafter we will answer these questions. Okay, Loreto, let's have the first question. Oh, okay. Please advise, this is from Mariska, please advise on the percentage interest that must be shown, for example, where a trust is a shareholder and the beneficial owner are the beneficiaries. How do you divide the percentage? Lucinda?
Thank you very much for the question, Mariska. In terms of trusts specifically, and this is also some of the queries that we have received, you will not necessarily have a percentage of ownership. That is why the enhancement was built into the system where you can select ownership without a percentage indication. So there is a drop-down list as indicated, and the user guide will give you an indication on how to select the correct one, which shows trustees, beneficiaries, founders of trusts, etc., where you can select the correct beneficial owner in terms of trusts that are shareholders in companies.
Okay, Mariska, I hope that answers your question. Our next question is from Mark. Explain how the BO must be shown in the share register and the level of the BO might be many levels down.
Okay. Thank you, Mark. Yes, as in that specific slide that I indicated, the legislation is very specific about the information that must be indicated and the extent of that the extent of the beneficial ownership information. So there's no set template on what that securities register, it's not a share register, securities register must look like. But there is guidance in the legislation on specifically what type of information needs to be provided. If the beneficial ownership information is many levels down, or there are various beneficial owners in place that can be heuristic persons or natural persons, and then getting to the warm body at the end of the line, then all of that information needs to be indicated in the securities register. So it might be that there's some development required from entities in order to get their securities registers updated to comply with the legislation.
Okay, Ma, I'm sure that will help you. If you would like our presentation, please send us an email on education@cipc.co.za and we will be able to send you the BO presentation. Okay, Loretta, let's see. Your question is, where do we find the disclosure form?
Hi, Lorette. The disclosure form is not an actual form. As I said in the presentation, there's no set templates. It's something that the CIPC just developed as to assist in the upload of the information. So you can go and draft in the form of an Excel spreadsheet. You can draft information in a Word document, organogram, in the form of tables. It is just that the information needs to be provided under the heading of a disclosure form so that the CIPC know what information we need to look for. But it can be in any format.
Okay, our next question, Melinley. When filing a BO with no beneficiary interest to declare, one can only upload the securities register and certified ID. I cannot upload anything else like the director's passport copies or the trust disclosures. I have logged several tickets about this and was told it was a block on the system, but that it has been resolved. The problem, however, still remains, and I have logged further tickets, but I am not receiving any response to it.
Thanks, Madeleine. In terms of this specific query, if you selected the specific category of a non-affected company with no beneficial ownership information to declare, so there's zero information, zero beneficial owners and no one with effective control over the entity, then that will be the only information that needs to be uploaded, which is mandatory. It is the securities register, the mandate is mandatory with all filings, and then the certified ID of the filer. If there's no beneficial ownership information to declare, there's no need to upload the director's passport information or any trust disclosures, because you are declaring that there is no beneficial ownership information, so there's no need to upload those supporting documents.
Okay, the next question is, will be received notification of such rejected, nullified application, or will these be sent to the directors?
Yes, Juanita. Once this part of the next steps of the development of the register is finalized, there will be wide communication on how this will work. But essentially, it is the filer will receive notification of the rejection or nullified applications with the reasons for rejection. So if the ID wasn't there, or the securities register is not there, or the certification attached to the ID is not correct, those will all form part of the rejection reasons, and then the client or the filer that submitted will be able to refile and correcting the whatever the reasons for rejection were.
Okay. I've logged the BO, but the certificate was only I've uploaded the info, etc.
I assume, Auri, that you mean that the certificate was blank. Beneficial ownership certificate is only issued when there is beneficial ownership information to declare. In the case of the tick box for the affected company or non-affected company with zero beneficial ownership information, there's no certificate issued, and the relevant filer will receive only, and the directors and CC members will receive notification that the submission was done, but the certificate is only issued in the event where there's beneficial ownership information to be filed. If that is beneficial ownership information that was completed, an actual beneficial owner information and not just the securities register, etc., then you will receive a certificate. If not, please feel free to submit a query on the query resolution system, on the inquiry system, and one of the BOT members will assist you with that. Sometimes we do get issues that we revert to our technical team to just have a look on why a certificate might be blank. But bear in mind, only if beneficial ownership information is declared. If you selected any of the other two tick boxes, there's only a notification and no certificate issued.
Okay, thank you, Lucinda. Cindy, what can we not download some forms of proof that a company has been filed as affected has been submitted?
That's the thing that I just mentioned. If you selected affected company, there is no beneficial ownership information submitted because the affected company tick box was selected. So we cannot provide a beneficial ownership certificate. There is a notification sent to the filer and the directors and members of the CC confirming that the requirements in terms of the legislation has been met, and that is your proof that the filing has been done.
Okay, that's great. Next question. How can we reverse an incorrect filing? Example, if you filed as an affected company accidentally.
That's not possible. So once you've submitted an application, that will go to the verification processing that I indicated in the presentation, where the CIPC beneficial ownership team will look at the information submitted. If we see that there's an error or the information is incomplete, etc., this will form part of the rejection reasons, and then the filer will be provided with an opportunity to correct that.
Okay. Explain affected company without referring to sections and acts.
Unfortunately, you cannot explain affected company without referring to sections and acts because that is where the definition is derived from. An affected company is a company as described in terms of the legislation, and as a declaring company, you have to look at the requirements set out in the legislation. As I've mentioned, the user guide that I've referred you to tries and explain in a simpler way what is meant with an affected company and a non-affected company. So you're welcome to make use of that user guide, which is downloadable from the CIPC website when doing your beneficial ownership submissions.
Okay. If a company is the shareholder of the declaring company, whose details need to be provided by the natural person's options on the CIPC website? I feel CIP needs to give more information regarding trust or companies who own the shares. I don't even know if we've been submitting correct informations because CIPC isn't giving any feedback.
Thanks, Shantae. This is part of the development that I've mentioned already. The compliance requirements in terms of the legislation is that you need to submit beneficial ownership information and at least do due diligence in what is required in terms of the legislation. However, we do understand that this is a very new concept and there might be errors creeping in or not sure that the correct information was filed, etc. That's why we are building the actual processing system where beneficial ownership officials from the CIPC will examine the filings and then reject or nullify such filings if there are any problems. So in those rejection reasons, you will get feedback from the CIPC on what was incorrect of your filing, and you have the opportunity to correct that through the refiling mechanism. To answer your other question in terms of the heuristic person that is a shareholder of a company to get and trusts to get to the natural person or warm body, that is where you can make use of your disclosure form that I mentioned, where an organogram can be drawn up reflecting the company that is a shareholder, with that company's shareholders getting to the end of the line where you have a natural person, warm body that might be a beneficial owner in terms of the declaring company. So make use of that form. Draw up a few. We have received quite a few organograms already. That's quite extensive, but unfortunately, we cannot provide you with a template and what that needs to look like. We have very different and complex structures, and that must be the responsibility of the declaring company to provide as much information to the CIPC as possible.
Okay, thank you for that. What are the implications of not filing or for late filing the BO?
So, as I've mentioned, that notice that has been published on the CIPC website about the enforcement of beneficial ownership compliance from the 1st of October, that is not a deadline per se that you have to file now BO before the 1st of October. The requirements in terms of the legislation, the regulations still apply that I've mentioned in my presentation as well. Pre-existing entities incorporated before the 24th of May, incorporated after the 24th of May, and looking at the anniversary date of that entity, they have to submit their beneficial ownership information within 30 days. What is going to happen in terms of the enforcement, and it's very clearly indicated in the notice as well, is that the CIPC has started looking at the submissions for of compliance of beneficial ownership, my apologies. And we are going to start evaluating these beneficial ownership submissions and engage with entities on why their filing has not been done as yet. If remember, even if there's no beneficial ownership information to declare, there's still a requirement, a mandatory requirement to submit a securities register or beneficial interest register as applicable. So that requirement must be met. Implications if there is no filing, it is tantamount to non-compliance of the Companies Act, and such a company can face sanctions like compliance notices and administrative orders sanctioned by the court. So it's very, very important. Even if you are not 100% sure, as the previous person indicated, whether it's correct or not, ensure that you comply with the filing requirements. Discrepancies and errors and incomplete filings, etc., the CIPC will assist with those in guiding the filers to the correct filing information at the end of the day.
Okay, thank you for that. Amelia's question is, after the BO is filed, a disclosure form is issued by the CIPC. May I suggest that this document indicates that the document only reflects BO with 5% interest and up?
Thanks, Amelia. I actually remember you directed this specific query to me as well. I think you mean that the CIPC issues a beneficial ownership certificate, not a disclosure form. The reflection of 5% interest and up, or the 5% threshold, it's not, I think, necessary to indicate this in terms of the beneficial ownership disclosure certificate, because this information is in the legislation and in all the guidance notes and user guides, etc., that's already been published. So it remains, and I remember your query as well, that you mentioned that the banks, etc., will want to know why there's only certain beneficial owners declared and not all of them. But we have been working very closely with the banks, the Financial Intelligence Center, SARS, etc. So they are all aware of this threshold. The Banking Association of South Africa and the Prudent Authority, the Reserve Bank, is part of the Beneficial Ownership Transparency Interdepartmental Committee. So this is not something that there will be an issue when they get to that, because they were all part of the drafting of the legislation and they are all part of the knowledge of what the requirements are.
Okay, thank you, Lucinda. Our next question, who is the related and interrelated persons?
You'll have to give me a bit more context than that.
Okay.
Yeah, so
So I
that
have
I
to that
assume that
now.
is in terms of the affected companies, but you have to go and have a look at the definition. And again, the user guide. The user guide gives you a clear indication of where that related and interrelated parties come from in terms of the Companies Act.
Okay. Our
Yeah,
next
hi,
question.
Lucy. So I think it is coming from Section 2 of the Companies Act, where
Yes.
talking about the, yeah, but the client can refer to Section 2 of the Companies Act. It explains in details who are the related and the unrelated persons. So talking about the marriage, the children, stuff and like that. Thank you. Sorry
Thanks,
for interrupting.
Lisbon. You can type those responses for us in the chat. Thank you.
Okay. Matthew's question. We note that there are new COR forms that need to be accompanied with specific reporting to the CIPC. When will these COR forms be made available to the public?
Now I just muted myself, almost talked to myself. There are two COR forms that relate specifically to amendments of beneficial ownership information. So those forms will be built into the amendments process. Once that is ready, it's not going to be a downloadable form that you can access via the CIPC. It's going to be a web-based form. So the information contained in that form will be available for you to complete on the CIPC beneficial ownership register once you want to submit a amendment, and that development has been done.
Okay. Amelia is back. Non-affected co without BO. Would you mind sharing a few examples in this regards, please?
Okay, so the easiest one, Amelia, that I can think of immediately. Say you have, and these will probably be only applicable with your smaller companies, your small to medium enterprises, is where you have a sole director of a private company, which is also the 100% shareholder of that company. There is no contractual obligations where any other person has any control over how this company is run. There is no other person there's no additional shareholders, there's no person with additional voting interests, there's no additional person that has the right to appoint and remove directors. This is where you only have, I'm the sole director, I'm the sole shareholder, this is my company, I have 100% control and ownership. No additional person with beneficial ownership information.
Okay. The next question. Does mean we need to load a document with percentage of each shareholder?
This information needs to be indicated in the securities register itself. So it's not a separate document for each and every shareholder. This information must already be contained in the securities register, which is obligatory for all companies to hold.
Okay. If I start a beneficial ownership submission, will someone else be able to submit a completed submission, or will my start prevent this?
Okay, I think I understand you. If that, this is where the mandate comes in. If Lucinda Steenkamp has been provided a mandate in writing from the declaring company to submit their beneficial ownership information, it's very unlikely, highly unlikely, that this mandate will be provided to another person to file on behalf of this company. That is why the declaring company is very important, or the mandate from the declaring company is very important. It is where a natural person with an active customer code is provided a mandate on behalf of the declaring company to provide that information. it's highly unlikely for me that a company will provide 3 or 4 mandates to 3 or 4 different persons with all the beneficial ownership information that they need to declare just to do their beneficial ownership declaration on their behalf.
Okay, our next question is from Brandon. What is the difference between the securities register and the beneficial interest register that has to be uploaded?
Okay, Brandon. So the securities register is your shareholders. I'm going to explain this as plainly as possible. It's not as simple, but just bear with me in trying to explain that. Your securities register looks at your shareholders. Why I'm saying it's plain, because you have other types of securities as well, like debentures, etc. So for the purpose of this explanation, I'm only going to refer to shareholders. So your securities register will reflect your shareholders. By way of an example, I am 80% shareholder of ABC Shoes. Okay. That is Lucinda Steenkamp. Her information is going to be indicated in the securities register. Now, beneficial interest register, in terms of Section 56 of the Companies Act, explains that this is where someone has an interest in terms of the issued securities. To give you an example based on my earlier example, if Lucinda Steenkamp is, for example, married in community of property, and the shareholding of ABC Shoes is not outside of the communal property by any means, or whatever the case may be, then my spouse is a beneficial interest holder in terms of my 80% shareholding. And that is where the beneficial interest information comes in. So it is where information, or where a person has an interest, a beneficial interest in the securities that are issued. I hope that explains it a bit.
Thank you, Lucinda. Okay, Ronel's question is, our company is a wholly foreign owned company with international shareholders and listed on the Securities Exchange, 6 Swiss Exchange. Okay, is that another question as well? Do we need to submit the information? And if so, will the company director based in the RSA be not a shareholder? Details sufficient.
Okay, I'm sorry, but your query doesn't really make sense to me. If you it comes down to the declaring South African company. So if you are a declaring South African company, that is your 100% shareholder is a foreign juristic person, then that is information that you will indicate on the disclosure. For example, where you will draw up your organogram that refers to this foreign entity, that refers to their shareholders, beneficial interest holders, and beneficial owners at the end of the line.
Okay, thank you for that. Can you please assist by elaborating on Notice 53?
Okay, so as I've mentioned already, Notice 53 about the enforcement of compliance is exactly that. The notice is self-explanatory, where it indicates that from the 1st of October, the CIPC is going to start enforcing compliance. This does not mean that we are going to start issuing compliance notices left, right, and center, but this does mean that we are going to start investigating why certain entities that are beneficial ownership submission require compliance did not comply with requirements. So even if you are of the opinion that there's no beneficial ownership information to declare, so I don't have to do anything, there is still a securities register and beneficial interest register filing component that needs to be done. So at the end of the line, there must be the amount of entities and CCs on the CIPC registers that all have to comply with this legislation. And this process, where we are embarking on the 1st of October, is just to start. I don't want to use the word force, but just starting to interact with entities and advise on or find out why they have not been compliant with the legislation as yet.
Thank you. Our next question is, can you explain the difference between UBO and beneficiary interest? From what we understand, BI is only if one shareholder holds on behalf of someone else. Not all companies will have BI registers.
This is correct. The difference between a beneficial owner and beneficial interest is the fact that beneficial interest is what you are indicating is where there is an interest being held in terms of a issued security. So we are only talking about shareholding here, whereas beneficial ownership can be anything there that in terms of that list that is in the user guide and the legislation. Even effective control, like the right to appoint or remove directors, is also beneficial ownership. It's not beneficial interest because it doesn't relate to securities. Not all companies will have beneficial interest registers. You're 100% correct. The reason why beneficial interest registers will be applicable to affected companies, those that are listed on the different stock exchanges, is that in most of these instances, these interest in securities is not being held by that warm body in his or her own name. It is registered with a stockbrokers association, for example. So that is where the beneficial interest register side comes in to get to the information of the warm body that is the actual beneficial interest holder or actual shareholder in terms of a specific company, but it is being held by a stockbrokers association, for example. So it is held on behalf of a warm body.
Thank you. Nikki, the question is, still struggling to lodge a draft for foreign beneficial owners. What must we do in this case?
You are more than welcome to submit your query via the inquiry system. It's difficult for me on this platform to assist with a technical query.
Okay. The next question is, we have issues with ID verification. My ID was used to register on CIPC is not accepted with the BO filing. Why would that be? It shows ID verified as a red X and I cannot submit.
The problem with the ID verification, and I apologize in advance, this is something that we are aware of. What we have seen is in terms of the legislative requirements, the CIPC is mandated to verify all IDs of filers and beneficial owners information submitted. And the process that we are validating these IDs against is through the Department of Home Affairs. Unfortunately, this is not something that CIPC has control over. Department of Home Affairs has indicated to us on numerous times that they experience between certain times a high volume of plug-in, for lack of a better word, against their database to do the verifications, which then bombs out and doesn't allow for the verification. So that is why, especially between 10 o'clock in the morning and about 3 o'clock in the afternoon, is where the highest traffic to their database is and where you will receive problems with the validation. We cannot do away with that validation because we have to, in terms of the legislation, validate IDs of South African citizens against the only universal database, which is the Department of Home Affairs. The reason why an ID, exact same ID, will be able to go through for new company registration, for example, is because that we have embarked on a process of delinking from the Department of Home Affairs for certain processes to ease the processing and the validation procedure, but unfortunately we can't do that in terms of beneficial ownership. So all that we can do, and that is the same feedback that you will receive once you submit a query to the CIPC, is to try and do these beneficial ownership filings and the validation outside of the heavy traffic hours.
Thank you, Lucinda. Our next question is, what do we submit for self companies? And what if a company has stopped trading and is in deregistration process? Do we still have to submit?
Yes, so if you are the holder of a shelf company, then you are accessing basically effective control over that entity and therefore a beneficial owner that must be declared. Entities that are in deregistration process is still active, and they still need to comply with the beneficial ownership or securities register requirements, because at any point annual returns can be filed or the company can decide to continue trading, so that compliance requirement is still applicable.
Thank you. Our next question is, if trust is 100% shareholder of company and all beneficiaries are minors, how do you disclose this BO, as CIPC is not allowing BOs that are under the age of 18? How do we disclose the BO in this case?
This is what I've already explained in terms of the disclosure form that you must make use of in order to indicate that organogram. In terms of trusts where you have beneficiaries as minors, that information can be indicated on the disclosure form. Remember, this is protected information; it's not disclosed to the public. It can be indicated on the disclosure form, and the trustees indicated as the beneficial owners in terms of the BO filing itself, and then you upload the disclosure form, which indicates the information not accepted by the CIPC. Same with complex structures. All of that information you submit via that disclosure form that can be in any format that is easiest for the company to provide.
Thank you, Lucinda. Our next question is, how do I download the certificates once submitted, as I cannot download it?
Sorry, another technical question. I won't be able to answer that from here. It is supposed to be downloadable from the system. If you have a problem, then you need to submit a query so that you can be specifically assisted.
Okay. Next question. Will companies be penalized if the BO is not submitted? The reason is due to the system not working. I have submitted tickets and contacted the call center numerous times about my errors.
Will companies be penalized if the BO is not submitted? The reason is due to the system not working. So, indicating that the system is not working is not a valid reason for non-compliance because it's not specific. No declaring company will be penalized for something that is outside of their control, but it will have to be valid reasons for why there's non-compliance, and that will be in line with the engagements by the CIPC with companies from the 1st of October in finding out why there is non-compliance.
Okay, our next question is, good day. You said in the beginning you will get back to explaining the due date, 1st October 23. Sorry if I missed that. We have a lot of companies to file. CIP Systems has been working very slow and kicking us out. I did log an inquiry with attachments. Will date be extended?
Okay, so the 1st of October is not a due date. The 1st of October is a date that the CIPC is going to start interacting with companies and finding out why they are not beneficial ownership filing compliant.
Okay. What do we do when shares are split between companies and not natural persons? And furthermore, the main shareholder is a public listed company.
I have to refer you to my presentation again, which indicated that there's two questions that need to be answered for you to select the correct category. If you are the declaring company is regarded as an affected company or a non-affected company, then the second question that you need to answer is whether it is there is beneficial ownership information to declare or not, and this will guide you on how to submit that information. When in doubt, if you have complex ownership structures, which include heuristic persons, then make use of the disclosure form.
Okay. Megan, you can also go to the CIPC website. The presentation and this podcast will be uploaded on the website. You can also view this presentation again on our CIPC Facebook page. Our next question is, a deceased estate is the shareholder as the estate is not worn up. Whose information do we declare as the BO?
That will depend on the deceased estate. Where does the beneficial ownership information come in? If that person that is deceased is a shareholder in the declaring company, for example, and the estate is not wound up yet, there is still an executor appointed. So that executor has control over that
Estate.
shareholding and that estate, and therefore that it will be declared as beneficial owner with supporting documents.
Okay, thank you. The next question. Inquiries.cipc.co.za also doesn't have an option for BOs. What category must we select when creating a ticket?
Okay, so just you select corporate legal because beneficial ownership falls under the legal umbrella. If you select the corporate legal category, my apologies, then you will see BO there and you can select that subcategory.
Okay. Nikki's question, still struggling to lodge foreign beneficial owners' addresses. Certain towns and countries not available to select. What must we do?
Okay, so again, this is a technical question, so please submit this through the inquiry system. We had one of these a while back, and when we deep dived into why they couldn't select, it was a UK address. It was seen that the incorrect region was selected. They selected Great Britain instead of United Kingdom, and that is what caused the issue. So if you still make sure that you're selecting the correct region, if there's still an issue, please lodge an inquiry. As I indicated, individual beneficial ownership team together with the technical support from ICT will try and ascertain why you are having a problem in submitting that.
Okay. Our next question is, for accounting firm, does power of attorney needs to be at each individual's company's letterhead, or can it be on the accounting firm's letterhead where the director signs?
I'm not sure I understand. Is the accounting firm mandated to file, which is not correct? The mandate needs to be provided to a natural person, or is the accounting firm the declaring company? So if an accounting firm is doing submission of their beneficial ownership information for various declaring entities, then the mandate for each of those entities must be on the company letterhead for that declaring company, providing the mandate to a natural person. I cannot stress this enough. It cannot be to a firm or another company or secretary house to file on their behalf. It must be given to a natural person.
Thank you for that. Will CCs with 100% membership vested in one individual needs to submit BO?
Someone is in a bathroom. I can just hear water in the background, so please mute if um thank you. Let me just go through that was distracting. Will CC with 100% membership vested in one individual need to submit BO? Remember, the question comes again to beneficial ownership. If you are 100% member of a close corporation, you are not regarded as a beneficial owner because that is again known information that, but CCs have the requirement to file the members register as the same as the securities register in terms of profit companies.
Okay, thank you for that. Next question, just as an example, if a PTY only has one shareholder and they are natural persons, that's this category as a non-affected company with no beneficial ownership to declare.
Yes, so if those two questions that I asked indicated in the beginning, if you answer those in the negative, indicating that this is not an affected company in terms of the definition, so it's a non-affected company, and there is a 100% shareholder of this company with no other beneficial ownership attached to it. There's no contract in place where they derive an interest from the company. There is no um, anything that indicates that the shareholding is being held by someone else or on behalf of someone else where there's beneficial interest, then yes, then it will be the category of non-affected with zero beneficial ownership to declare, and then the securities register must be uploaded.
Thank you for that question. Okay, the next question is, if a company is the shareholder of the declaring company, whose details need to be provided by the natural persons option on the CIPC website? I feel CIPC needs to give more information regarding
We've
trust in
had
company.
this query
I think
already,
we had
Shani.
this question. Yes.
Yes,
I'm so sorry about that.
no problem.
Can we please have the next question? Is if there is a rejection, will we be able to fix only the issue or will it be a complete new filing?
Yeah. So for rejection, you're only going to be able to correct which was rejected. So you're going to have two different processes. You have your rejection of already filed applications where there's something wrong or there's an error or whatever, and the opportunity to refile that same submission with the errors corrected, of course, and then where there is a completely new filing where there's amendment to the beneficial ownership information. So two different processes. So when it's rejected, you will only be able to fix the reasons for rejection of that specific filing. It's not a new filing.
Okay, thank you for that. What happens when a company has different banks as shareholders? We would not have the BO info on these people.
So again, I cannot advise you on who your beneficial owners are. You have to look at the definitions and see whether, okay, so in terms of the definition, this might be an affected company. Tick that box and submit the mandatory information. And then that information will be indicated somewhere else, like Straight, that has record of all of these, and that information is then validated against the CIPC records as well.
Okay, what level do you stop to submit, i.e., when a PTY is a shareholder and the next shareholder is a PTY and the next is a listed company? Where do we stop?
You stop when you reach the warm bodies that are beneficial owners.
Okay, thank you. Thank you for that answer. The next question is from Talisha. How do you file a BO for a homeowners association, a NPC? There may be 50 owners, but only 5 directors. Whose information do you declare?
Okay, so um, the CIPC wants as much information to be declared as possible. So if you have a homeowners association, like you are indicating, which is a non-profit company with a members register, and you have 10 members, it makes sense to indicate that beneficial, and they have a beneficial ownership in terms of a property or whatever the case may be. They derive a benefit from this membership. Then those 10 members or owners can be indicated together with directors if they exercise effective control over this non-profit company. Likewise, if you have a MPC or with a homeowners association that have 200 members, it is obvious that this information cannot be declared on a individual basis, each natural person, and that is where you will make use of the submission of your members register for an NPC in the first place, as well as the organogram that can indicate all this information in a 1 or 2 page document without having to declare the beneficial ownership of all 200 owners.
Okay, our next question is from Elizabeth. Will CIPC be working with the Master's Office to obtain the trust information?
Yes, the CIPC is and the Master's Office are both part of the Interdepartmental Committee on Beneficial Ownership Information, but we are not going to get trust information from the Master's Office. What is going to happen is, because the CIPC is responsible for corporate vehicles and the Master's Office is responsible for beneficial ownership submission of trusts, what is going to happen is that the two databases are going to be validating against each other, and with interdepartmental information sharing, in the sense so that we can validate we've received trust information as part of the organogram of a complex ownership structure as a shareholder of a company, and then validate this information against the Master's Office database.
Okay, our next question is, do subsidiaries that form part of an affected company have to still go through the beneficial ownership submission, or can they submit their share register when they submit their annual returns?
I think you will find in the definition of beneficial ownership and or the definition of affected companies that subsidiaries are included in that definition. So subsidiaries will follow the same process as affected companies and only submit the mandatory documentation requested for affected companies.
Okay, our next question is, what is the difference between a share register and a security register?
There is no such thing as there is no difference. A share register is the old reference that only referred to shares. This was amended in terms of the current Companies Act to securities register, which includes all forms of securities, which can be shareholding, it can be shares, it can be debentures. There are different forms of security. So we urge the public not to make use of a share register. You have a share certificate, which shows your individual shareholding in terms of shares, but the right term is securities register.
Okay. Please confirm if we need to drill down to the warm body where a trust is 100% shareholder, or do we only submit the trust name and disclose full BO details to the master?
Thanks, Hayla. This is the same as the previous question in terms of the MPC members, for example. Again, we want to receive as much information on beneficial ownership as possible, but where you have 2 trustees and 4 beneficiaries, that all of that information, the warm body information, must be declared with the CIPC. Where you, however, have 200 beneficiaries. It makes no sense to go and declare every single person, 200 of them, as beneficiaries in terms of beneficial ownership, in terms of that trust, with the 5% threshold applied, of course. And that's when then you will declare the trustees, for example, and then attach the organogram to reflect the the beneficiaries. So it's a discretionary process where you just have a look at what is practical.
Okay. This question is, why don't we receive a certificate if a shareholder is a trust? Proof of submission.
The certificate is not related to whether it's a trust or not. The confirmation certificate relates to whether beneficial ownership information was submitted. You cannot get a beneficial ownership certificate if there was no beneficial ownership information submitted. If the affected company box was ticked or no beneficial ownership information declared, there will be no certificate and only a notification.
Must the mandate be on the company's letterhead or the filer's letterhead?
Company's letterhead, because that's the declaring company giving the instruction or the mandate to file on their behalf. Content of the mandate indicates the name and ID number of the filer to whom the mandate is being given.
Okay. Our next question is from Zola. When choosing affected company, the percentage shareholding is 0. There is no drop-down menu. How do we declare the percentage on the online form?
When you select the affected company tick box, and this is clear in the user guide, please have a look, then there is no beneficial ownership information being submitted, and you only submit the beneficial interest register with the other compulsory documents. So there won't be a drop-down menu. It's only applicable to non-affected with beneficial ownership to declare.
Thank you. The next question, a foreign company that has a registered branch with CIPC, do we the BO submission for that?
Yes, regarded as if it's an external company registered with the CIPC, yes, external companies are also required to submit their beneficial ownership information.
Thank you. Okay, our next question is, leading to impractical situation where BO information within the required threshold is not readily available. Beneficiary owners not hold a direct shareholding in the foreign listed company.
Okay, so where you are have a declaring company and you are the filer for this company, have been mandated, the company is required to provide you with all the information that you as the filer need in order to submit that beneficial ownership information. Saying that the information is not readily available is a problem from the company's perspective because they have to have that information. Beneficial ownership information has been declared to the banks for many years now. This is only something that has come about in terms of corporate vehicles and trusts now. But companies have that responsibility to have all this information already available. So once they give that instruction for compliance filing by the filer, that information needs to be available and made available to the filer.
Okay, our next question is, please give an example of a non-affected company that does not have BO information. For example, would a multinational like Coca-Cola select none because it's owned through various juristic persons structure, with natural persons potentially being at the holding company level?
Okay, so multinationals like Coca-Cola, that's also listed on various stock exchanges, for example, will not be a non-affected company. They fall within the definition of an affected company and need to provide information compulsory in terms of that specific requirement, therefore lodging a beneficial interest register.
Okay, our next question is, can one refile the BO for the same company if you realized you made a mistake? Example, I chose BO with no beneficiary interest to declare, but seems I should have chose BO with beneficiary interest to declare and then chose trust as BO.
So we won't be able to correct that specific filing, but if there is a situation where the submission is not correct because the wrong category was selected, you can do a whole new filing from scratch.
Okay, our next question is, the Act or register distinguish companies and external companies in the definition of BO and Section 33 and Section 56. External companies are not required to submit BO info, but the CIPC guidelines says they do. Please clarify.
The external companies is required to file beneficial ownership information.
Thank you.
It is
Linda?
indicated in the regulation specifically. Have a look at the regulation specifically.
Okay. Is it possible to file more than one BO in a year, for example, when two transfers took place during a financial year? We cannot file a second BO currently.
Yes, it is possible once we start finalize the development of the amendments process that I've mentioned in the presentation.
Okay. Our next question is, if filings are rejected, can the agents please give proper information as to why the BO was rejected? What specifically was the reasons or missing documents that is required in detail, please?
Okay, so as I've mentioned already, is the fact that once the processing system is brought online, where the CIPC back office officials were not agents, CIPC back office officials examine the applications. There is specific reasons for rejection, and as much guidance as possible will be provided for the reasons for rejection, and you will have the opportunity to refile.
Okay, our next question is, can you explain the deadline dates more clearly, please?
Which deadline dates?
I
It's
think it's
yeah,
referring
it's
again to
the query is not, as I've already explained, the 1st of October is not a deadline. It is a date where the CIPC is going to start enforcing compliance with the beneficial ownership filing submissions. With enforcing, what we mean with that is engaging with these entities on why they are not compliant. What are the reasons why they haven't filed their beneficial ownership information? The other deadline information, so to speak, is the requirements in terms of the pre-existing companies incorporated before the 24th of May 2023 that need to file their beneficial ownership information or securities and beneficial interest register as applicable within 30 days from their anniversary or incorporation date, the same in line with your annual return filing date requirements. And entities obviously incorporated after the 24th of May 2023 will have to file their beneficial ownership securities register or beneficial interest register as applicable within 10 days from incorporation.
Okay, thank you for that question. Vanessa, we submit the beneficiary ownership when we submit the annual returns. Is that okay?
That is okay, Vanessa, if the beneficial ownership requirement is in line with, or the anniversary date of this company, which is in line with the annual return requirement, and you submit your beneficial ownership compliant documentation, it is in compliance with the Act.
Okay. If your shareholder is an employment trust with 100 of employees, do you need to declare all of the employees or do you only declare the 4 trustees? that are the four persons making the decisions?
I think I've already answered a similar question. You have to use your discretion where you only have four people to declare in terms of beneficial ownership information. Then you provide the individual information for each. Where you have 100 beneficiaries, in terms of that trust, for example, then you cannot declare each and every individual, and that's where you make use of the disclosure form and the organogram.
Okay. Our next question is, how can I download the BO certificate when it has been completed and shows me that I can download it, but it won't allow me?
Yeah, this is a
Another
duplicate. I've
technical.
already, yeah.
Yeah, okay. Please log a call on the CIPC website for that question. Stacy's question is, what happens if only the email OTP is received and not the SMS one? I tried submitting on a return on Monday. I still haven't received the SMS.
So then, in that case, you'll have to request for OTPs to be resent because that would most probably be a network issue, cell phone network issue, if you didn't receive via SMS.
Okay, thank you. The next question. We are almost coming to an end. Is there anything else that needs to be addressed before? Lucinda, would you like to do a closing for us before 11:30?
Okay, so I'm sure. Thanks, Shawnee. I'm sure that there's still a lot of questions, everybody, in terms of beneficial ownership information. But what I would like to urge you is please go and have a look at the presentation. Those two questions that you need to ask yourselves as a declaring company before you submit the information. It will really assist in selecting the correct category. Go and have a look at the user guide. I've had feedback in the past that it was really helpful in terms of ascertaining the information that we require, as well as why we require it. And if there is still areas of that you need clarity on, or where there is technical issues, please feel free to make use of the inquiry system. There is a dedicated team looking at the beneficial ownership queries, and if we can't answer your queries, we will find someone that can. So it will definitely be given the attention it deserves. If you follow those three steps in looking at the user guide and looking at asking those two very specific questions and filing your submission in line with that, then there shouldn't be a problem with the beneficial ownership information submission. If there is, please make use of the inquiry system. We will assist you. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Lucinda. This was really a very informative session. Please remember the podcast and the presentation will be on the CIPC website under webinars. You are welcome to go and view it there. Also, remember on our Facebook page, that is the CIPC Facebook page, you can view this podcast again. Thank you, everyone, very much for this session. Goodbye.